This feudalism thing was a very unique setup and truly changed Europe. It was primarily an economic system. I guess that isn't really a surprise. As Mr. Roten has probably told you, economics is behind everything.
Feudal society was a pyramid with the king at the top and the peasants at the bottom doing all the hard work. Nobody, not even the lords, owned any land. They simply had the use of it as long as they provided military service for the king. The peasants toiled in the fields, supporting those with more important things to do, like praying and fighting each other.
Yeah, it's an excellent system, if you ask me. Stinking peasants.
But since the lord of the manor was often away from his estate, fighting in the king's wars, he had to be able to rely on his peasants to organise themselves. In the same way that the lord of the manor had to provide military service to the king, the peasants had to provide the lord of the manor with so many days' labour in return for the land they held from him. Historians have given this arrangement the catchy title of feudal burden. But just how much of a burden were these feudal duties? For example, the peasants who ploughed these fields 600 or 700 years ago bore one of the heaviest feudal burdens in the kingdom. That is to say, they had to work for the lord of the manor for something like 50 to 60 days in the year to provide their accommodation and pay their taxes. Nowadays, most of these fields are occupied by the BMW car plant. Now, to pay for their rent and taxes today, an assembly line worker has to work for something like 80 days in the year. That's nearly a month longer than the worst-off medieval peasants. What's more, the feudal arrangement was a two-way thing. The lord had responsibilities to his peasants. In fact, twice a year he was supposed to lay on feasts for them, as a sort of thank you. I can't remember the last time the taxman took me out for a slap-up dinner. Or a picnic.
The fancy definition of feudalism is an economic system in which landholders gave protection to people in return for work. That work took different forms, as we'll see in a minute, but just think of it as one guy owning the land, and one guy working on it. The lowest level works, the serfs, were bound to the land. They were not allowed to leave. If someone else came in and took over the land, the serfs kind of came with it. They weren't slaves, but they were pretty darn close. Here's a way to look at it in a diagram. This might be kind of confusing, but just follow along, and I think you'll get it. The king is at the top of feudalism. Everyone basically works for him. The king divides his land up among some nobles, who are basically the managers. Each noble hires some knights who provide protection to the noble. In return, the noble gives them a fief, which is a plot of land. The peasants on the land provide their own labor, mostly farming, to give food to everyone. The knights protect them in return as well. Ultimately, though, the king takes a piece of everything for himself. Still don't get it? Well, let's try to tell a little story to help explain it. Once upon a time there was a very rectangular-shaped nation known as Imagineland. Imagineland had a king who built himself a big castle. He realized that it would be too much work to use the land himself, so he divided into 4 parts. He gave control of each part to one of his buddies. Those dudes built themselves a manor, which is kind of like a small castle, in their own territory. They then split their part up into lots of little parts. Some of these parts are used as farmland and some are used as housing for the serfs and knights. These guys all pay taxes to the noble, who then pays taxes to the king. Serfs work, knights protect, nobles collect, king gets rich. Easy, right? The worst role, clearly, was the serf, which were also called peasants. These were the common people who did not own land, and they made up about 90% of the population. It is odd to think that so many people would choose to live this way, but they did.
Of course, the lord of the manor lived like a lord. But what kind of a stinking hovel would his peasants have called home? The answer can be found at Britain's newest, oldest village, Cosmoston, on the outskirts of Cardiff, where a team of archaeologists have painstakingly recreated a complete medieval village. There's a surprising range of properties on offer. First up, a medieval bachelor pad, or rather, an affordable studio apartment suitable for the single working peasant.
Must have been pretty unpleasant life, doesn't it?
It could be quite grim, but again, we've got to get rid of all of our modern views on what makes a good life. So this is how the lowest of the low would live.
Yeah, we're right at the bottom, yeah.
It's quite spacious, really.
Well, that's right. He has a nice little cottage, but that's about all he has going for him.
Yeah. So what does he do, this?
He's a landless labourer. Here's a chap who's had his land taken away right at the bottom.
And so he's got a fire, he's cooking himself something.
Yeah, very basic pot here above his hearth. Tiny amounts of wood that be used, none of the roaring fires that we'd think of, because all of his wood has to pay the Lord of the Manor a wood penny, go out into the woods, and he can just collect what's fallen.
And he's got a bed, I see.
Delightful bed here, with just a mattress full of straw thrown on top of it, and a couple of rough old woolen blankets.
Plenty of fleas, I expect.
Hopefully not too bad, because hanging above them, we have some flea bane.
Oh.
So in theory, that keeps the fleas away.
If that's a heap, what was it like on the top of the bottom of the heap? Next on the tour, an upmarket, semi-detached family home. A decidedly des res for the upwardly mobile professional peasant couple.
So whose house is this, Nick?
Now this is the Reeve's house.
And what's a Reeve?
So
Tell me what
we're
a
going
Reeve
up
is.
market here. Every year, the free men of the village vote
Yeah.
for who they want to be the Reeve.
Yeah.
And the Reeve is almost like a village manager. Keeps an eye on things, makes sure that everybody's farming the land properly. He's a wealthy man, a wealthy villager.
So he doesn't make his money out of being Reeve. He owns a lot of land.
That's right. He is the Land Rover Green Welly farmer.
And a very, very upper-class fireplace.
Oh, he can afford it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A Welsh dresser, I see.
Very important, especially for the Reeve's wife. The first thing you see as you come in is her fine pottery display.
So she's showing it off to everybody.
Showing her jugs off to everybody.
How rich I am.
Exactly. We have some nice examples here. This one is Santonge pottery.
Sounds French to me.
That's right, this has come up from the Bordeaux region, probably as part of the wine trade from that area. Anybody amongst the peasants is going to be drinking wine, it's going to be the Reeve and his family.
It doesn't sound that to me, then. Maybe I could be a medieval peasant. I'll think about it.
So, why did they do it? It is simple. Being alive and unhappy is better than being dead and free. With no empire there was no army. No army meant no protection. In order to feel safe, the commoners of Europe gave up their land by choice. Nobody had to force them. It was purely about survival. We'll see in the next unit that once protection was re-established, feudalism didn't last. That is all for the Dark Ages. Be sure to join us next time for the second half of medieval Europe, where we'll examine the fall of feudalism. Goodbye.